a couple more minutes.
Okay.
He says he's on.
Oh, he is. He's there.
You see him now? Okay.
Yes.
There we go. I guess Katrina, are you good?
I'm good. I just can't get my video to work for some
Okay.
reason. Can you see me?
No, we can't see you, but
Yeah, I'm not sure why.
it's okay.
I need to get my teenager in here.
Yeah. Well, since it's just a workshop and we're not taking any action, I think it's fine if you are just there audibly for now. And then maybe we can get it fixed before the meeting, but all right. Well, I would like to call to order this workshop of the Fayetteville Public Schools Board of Education for the purpose of revisiting our strategic plan goals and getting an update on that data. And so I will turn it over to Dr. Dugan. I think we will try to save questions. She'll probably give us some breaks within her presentation to ask questions. Since we're not in person, it's probably hard to just interject. So Dr. Dugan, if you could just take a couple breaks here and there to ask, to see if anyone has questions, that would be great.
Okay, I will.
All right, take it away.
All right. Okay, can everybody see my presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so I'm just going to go through, and before we get started on our own data, I just wanted to talk a little bit about what's going on across the country, because a lot of our data mirrors what we're seeing with other schools across the nation because of COVID. And so I've just linked a few studies, and if you need me to go back and give you the actual study, I will do that. But here are some of the things that we saw. So to be succinct about this, the students who were already at risk for maybe not achieving at the same rates as our upper SES students, they seem to take the hit the hardest with COVID, because when everyone went home, and of course Arkansas didn't stay home as long as some of these other schools, and so I do think we're probably making faster progress, but it definitely is a drop in achievement across the country. One of the things that I know I talked a little bit about this at the last board meeting, but I added something from NAEP. And NAEP shows that we had the largest declines in math ever. So that means that since they've been doing the NAEP assessment, which they test 4th and 8th grade, that because of COVID, it was basically the biggest impact. And you'll see some of our data mirrors that. So if you do have any more questions about these studies, just let me know, and I can either give you the study or we can talk a little bit more about it. So the way that I have sort of done this presentation to make it easier to manage is I'm going to put it in, I've got 3 goals. Usually we do goal 1, 2, and 3, and then Dr. Duncan handles goal 4. So for goal 1, it's going to be in blue. So we've got overarching goals, and then underneath each goal, we've got a goal and then metrics that go under that. Instead of making it where we just pull up the strategic plan and go through it, this is a little bit more of a narrative, because we're actually summarizing what's happened between 2018 and now. So first goal, all students will have equitable access and support to excel in personalized learning experiences and to meet academic challenges. So under this first goal, we have 1.1, and students will achieve equitable rates of growth as measured by standardized assessments. So I put 3 years on this just to show sort of the impact from COVID. So you can see that in 2019, which we started in 2018, but this is just a sort of a snapshot. You can see that in reading, when we moved to 2019 to 2021, you can see that our scores did drop. Now, they didn't drop the same in all areas, in all grades, but this gives you an indication that in reading, we're starting to come back to where we were. Some of our grade levels are making faster progress than others, but part of the issue is that many of our students who learn to read, those 3rd and 4th graders, they were some of the ones that when they came to school, either they didn't come to school, they learned online, or when they did come to school, we were wearing masks. And we know that reading really depends on being able to watch someone's face and make those sounds. So this is one of those things where we're making progress back. Some grades are making better progress than others. So this is math, and this again mirrors what the other research found, is that math seems to be taking the hardest hit. So you can see that we were much higher in math than we are now. We did take a drop, but again, we're starting to work back toward where we were in some grades. 3rd grade, you can see we're struggling. Again, those are the same students who, when they started school, was right in the middle of the pandemic. And we had a large number of, especially our younger students, who attended online. Science, we see the same thing. Science is highly correlated to reading. So we see that whenever students have trouble reading, they also have trouble with science, because that's a test that does measure a lot of reading in it. So you see, we are again making progress in some grades. So if you look at 4th grade, we're actually higher than we were before COVID. So in all of these areas, we're making progress. We're not quite where we were before. We're not quite where we were in 2019. So as a strategic plan, when we made these goals, it would have been impossible to predict that COVID would hit. So I think that as we go forward, we need to take into account of where our benchmark actually is, and we're going to be getting a new assessment. So this is the last year for ACT Aspire. We will be adopting a new assessment next year, and typically when we adopt new assessments, we do see a drop in achievement as we learn how to navigate that new testing. So as the board may want to talk about later, where do you want to make the benchmark for the next wave of assessments and goals? So this is just the information letting you know. Any questions so far? I know that was a whole lot of numbers. Most of it won't be so many tables.
Did I miss where the assessment was changing? What is that changing to?
Well, it's changing to a new, they haven't named it yet. The governor will be naming the new assessment. So we don't know what it's going to be called. We do know it's going to be created by a company called Cambium. They already are the ones that do ELPA 21. So we're familiar with the portal that they use for ELPA 21. So we're familiar with some of that. They're working right now on, they had teams of teachers come in November to Little Rock, and then so they picked some questions that will be, they match to our frameworks. So they'll pick the questions that were on the test, and then from then on we'll just be building a test bank. So it is going to be different. I'll find out more information next week. I'm on a DTC advisory board, so we're going to be talking about some of the test policies that may be changing with the new assessment.
Kelly, is that obviously Arkansas will be adopting that new assessment? Do we know what other states will be doing that, and where we can, like when we try to benchmark things and we think about, you know, a lot of these tests are it's comparative, district to district. Do we know anything about where else they'll be doing this new
Well, this new test will be specific to Arkansas because we actually get a lot more say in like what's going to be tested each grade. So it's tied completely to our frameworks and our standards, which means that so the way it works is they've been in this business a long time. If you go online, you can actually take practice tests. They've been doing several things in different states for a long time. I don't think that we're going to have a test that's exactly like another state because we don't have the same standards as other states. We could probably get close, but I do know what they are going to do is they're going to actually start doing crosswalks. And so they're going to be able to actually take the ACT Aspire, what we know, and then they're going to actually do correlations between the new test. And so we won't lose that norm reference. They'll also be doing one and comparing it to MAP. And so we will still get that norm data comparing us to everybody in the nation. But I don't think we're going to have the exact same test as anyone. The other thing about this test, it's adaptive. So it means that each student won't get the same test either. So there's a huge test bank of questions. And so the questions are just built, as this is a third grade math standard question. And as long as it fits our standard and the way it's written, it would be included into the test bank. So what's going to happen is, from what we understand so far, is the test is going to be adaptive, meaning as a student gets more questions right, they don't bump up to the next grade level, which is what MAP would do. But what they do is they go deeper and they start getting into the higher depth of knowledge for those questions. So we should be able to see what our highest students really can do, but it also shouldn't be that frustrating for students who are not at that level yet. So from what I can tell from they are not allowed to really talk about test questions, but the people I've talked to that went to those committee meetings, they're actually pretty excited about the test because it seems to be a very well-written test. It is going to be pretty rigorous. So, but that's something that we can work toward.
Yeah, a rigorous test is good. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Okay. So 1.1, again, is about equitable rates of growth through standardized assessments. So metric 1.14 is the percent of economically disadvantaged students scoring ready or exceeds. And again, based on that research that we saw before, this is very typical of what's happened across the country. Students with fewer resources, they were hit harder during COVID, and you can see that their rates of proficiency on our tests dropped quite a bit in 2021. And we are making progress. We've got some grades that are pretty close to where we were before, and we've got other grades that are still struggling. So again, these are the kinds of data we look at during the year using MAP. So we monitor this very closely. Okay, so that last one was reading. This is math. And again, I think you can see too that math took a big hit. Again, just like the research showed, that math seems to be one of the hardest hit areas in the country, as far as we're not where we should be compared to a normal year. All right, so metrics basically 5, 6, 7, and 8 underneath the same goal. So we're going to switch to more of a narrative because it's just a little bit easier. So the first metric we're going to talk about is the percentage of K2 students who are required to have intensive reading intervention plans, or IRIs. We've remained constant at around 16% per year. So we tend to vary from about 18 to 16, depending on what time in the year it is. And what happens is those kids, they do get extra help. They do get a lot of RTI support. And so as they move into third and fourth, we see that drop, but and then we just have a new wave. So we pretty much are hovering at 16%. We're also hovering right around 73%, 73.3% for our schools that achieve at least an 80 in growth. Again, an 80 represents 1 year of growth in the Arkansas ESSA system. And so anything below 80, we would say you're not, that school's not making at least year's growth. The schools that are not making growth are secondary schools, but that's extremely typical. As students get older and they start getting into 8th grade and above, it becomes much harder to make growth. And that's also why in ESSA, the percent of your ESSA score is lower in secondary than it is in K6. So while we're not quite making 80 on growth, it's actually pretty typical too. Student attendance. So student attendance is measured by the ESSA student engagement. And so in 2019, we're at 71.87. And then in 2022, we were at 56.7. Now, there are probably a lot of things we could use to explain some of this. I think partly parents are more apt to keep their children home longer when they're sick. They're more apt to keep them home sooner when they're sick. So again, it's being affected by COVID still and some of the changes we went through because of the pandemic. And so I think that has something to do with it. There are studies I did not include that also says that nationwide school attendance has dropped. So again, it's still part of the COVID ramifications. And then also, I know that Dr. Colbert has convened a committee to start really studying attendance and making sure we're very precise on the policy. So I'm sure he can tell you more about exactly what's going on in that committee. But this is something we're looking at very seriously, and it's something that principals are definitely talking about this quite a bit. And then finally, 1.8, 86.17% of schools in 2019 and 80% in 2022 had English language proficiency growth scores of 80 or above. And this is still pretty good for us because, again, English language learners, they got hit the hardest. So it's coming from how fast they're learning English. And so when they weren't at school or when everyone was wearing a mask, it was much harder for them to learn English. So we're starting to rebound on that. So we're not too far from where we need to be. And again, I've already talked about this. So the new assessment will be in 2024. So we'll have to talk about when the baseline needs to be reset. Okay, 1.2, students will participate in a variety of learning experiences and reinforce rigor. So some of the metrics we use, we track the percentage of students taking AP courses. And so that's increased quite a bit from 782 in 2019 to 935 in 2022. The high school has been very involved in the equal opportunity schools. So they've done a good job of getting more students to take AP. The percentage of students scoring a 3 or higher was 71.4% when we started tracking it. It fell to 56.9 in 2020. So you'll remember 2020 was actually when they had to take AP tests at home. So that was to be expected. And then we came back to 63.71%. And so again, we've still got a lot of students taking AP who had never taken advanced courses before. So we do have a lot more kids in AP, and our test scores are still above the national average. And then finally, Fayetteville Public Schools increased the number of concurrent course options to 34. All right, these metrics talk about CTE. So the number of students participating in CTE courses, we were at 3,546 in 2019, and right now we're at 4,628, and we have 59 CTE courses that are offered that align to business and workforce needs. All right, do I need to stop? Any questions right here? Goal 1 has lots and lots of numbers in it.
I just want to put a pin in attendance. I would like to, I don't know if this is the time in the workshop to talk as a board or with you all about attendance stuff. If we want to just, if we're just presenting and then talking later, or if we're integrating that. Does anyone have thoughts about that?
Well, we can go ahead and address this as under this matrix. So, and then I was going to have Ms. Shirley talk to you about the committee that I formed to address attendance. So why don't you share your thoughts with us and see if it's going to be in line with what we are doing?
Okay. I mean, I think there's obviously a huge attendance hurdle. We did a pretty good job as a district of keeping kids in school. And I think that's during, and Arkansas did. So I think that's important. What we got an email as a board a couple of weeks ago from a constituent named Autumn Tolbert talking about an attendance concern that she had. And I had some follow-up conversation with her. And when I was a kid, I think all the way through, we've done a lot to award perfect attendance or reward perfect attendance. And I would love to see our district, I'm not saying to stop rewarding perfect attendance, but I think that I would love to see a growth metric on that, not just year over year, but like growth that students and families could approach. I think that a lot of families don't know why we get so hot about attendance. Like, I think it just seems, I think that people can understand the kind of like workforce preparedness about like accountability and like coming to school when you're supposed to be at school and being on time. But I don't know that they know how it fits into to all of these matrices. And I wonder if there's a way that we can engage, that we can communicate with, I think, particularly elementary families, but maybe all families, and explain to them where we are and how we're looking at attendance. And then maybe doing if a kid's attendance in, because right now, I guess one of the things that Autumn was saying was, if your kid misses a day, then like everything is shot. Like you don't get, there's no reward available for you. There's no reward available for your family. And like, is it possible to create a system where you have your tardiness and your attendance stuff from like the first 9 weeks, and then you have your tardiness and attendance stuff from your second 9 weeks, and we reward growth there. Like if you do better in your, that there's a, and in some, we were at Leverett, and I know Leverett is as a board, and they have public tracking of the grades there. So I think there was some conversation with kids, but kids don't get themselves to school. They don't get themselves to school on time. And so I think communicating about those goals and the why of those goals with families, and celebrating the success of growth, not just the success of achievement with attendance and some of these other things might be useful and effective.
Okay, great. Yes, with the committee, we will be looking into all of those. And the communication piece is big, and we need to make sure they understand that attendance really affects the education for the child, the education for the district, and all. And so as we look at that needs to be a very important piece of that communicating to the parents. So Ms. Shirley, you want to just talk to them about the first meeting that you have had and where you all are with that attendance piece?
Yes, I absolutely can. I think first of all, we just reviewed the policy, and then Mary Claire had shared with us just draft policy updates that we'll be talking about later. But I think for a lot of our principals, the updates will really help take care of a lot of things, because we had Leanne Patterson come into our meeting, and she helps with our e-school. And I think even for absences, some of our principals didn't understand that regardless of if it's an excused or an unexcused absence, it still counts against a school within that ESSA format. So an absence is an absence regardless if a parent calls in or a student has been sick. So some of the absences, as you are aware of, in that new draft, we'll just talk about absences related to students or, who have family members on a sabbatical or family travel, vacation, and trips. If we have kids who've missed over 10 days, technically we need to drop them just like we always would have. We need to make sure that, school is really seen as something that's important. And I think with COVID, there allowed to be a lot of flexibility, but otherwise, we just need to be sure that we're making sure that we're enrolling and unenrolling the way we are supposed to as a school district. And then there were just a lot of different concerns that schools had shared, even within some really extensive absences. But again, it has to be related to, issues as we get older with, students, because you said, Megan, parents are the ones, especially for our younger kiddos, that are making the impact. Our kids don't always have the choice of how they get to come to school. And so they can get up and want to come, but if a parent isn't on top of things, then that can impact everything about their day. So especially with the PBIS approach, we've talked a lot about, even at the high school. I know Dr. Miller is getting real creative with, even if looking at attendance, and we're not talking about perfect attendance because we don't want to encourage kiddos to still feel like they have to come if they're sick. That's not real world. But looking at, when you're well, you're at school and that's your priority, but looking at opportunities for parking up front at the high school, even being able to get into kind of that the system, the lottery system a little differently than as a junior, I believe, for parking. They're trying to be real creative and thinking of things that are really important for students. And then also those celebration pieces of how we're celebrating kids who are showing up and making school a priority. So a lot of different things that we're talking about, and we'll be meeting again just to revisit some things that they shared.
Just really briefly, I wanted to share one more thing that Autumn shared with me that she thought was important, which is that I think when I shared with her our real data around attendance, that she was like, oh, I do see how that would be a problem, right? Like, I think that if when families hear our policy changes, or we are getting in touch with families about not coming to school or not being on time, that it can feel like we're nitpicking, that I think they're imagining that we have 99% of kids in school every day, and their one kid was late and they're getting harassed, they're getting picked at about it. But I think when we look at having that 56.7 as a student engagement score, and that I think that a lot of families can see how that would be not good. I think we all know that people all agree that most kids do better when they're in school, do better in school when they're in school. And just the communication around where we are, where we want to be as a community, the why there is what could be powerful in the communication.
Sure. And I think it may be helpful too, if Dr. Dugan, when we do back to school and schools need to share, share out with parents and be able to explain their testing data, just to be able to share that ESSA index piece on attendance. We might need to help principals break down that piece just a little bit more so it's more understandable by parents. Again, we don't have all parents who are going to be present for that, but they can also push that information out for those who weren't there to be able to receive that as well. But I do think one of the things we've talked about, and it does require a lot of time, but as we have kiddos who are missing a lot of school, it's just really important that they have parent meetings, because making phone calls, sending a letter, sending an email, we don't always know what information is getting to parents. And whenever they take the time to have them come in and meet face to face, that's where we seem to get the biggest impact.
I mean, there might be, I think, on top of that, and I'm sure that's the most effective way is just one-on-one, but I think even just our normal channels of social media and mass emails, we could start to emphasize the value of attendance, and just, I think, educate is the key thing, not just pushing attendance, but helping parents understand through, so, again, and you said this, Dr. Colbert, the communication piece is a big part of it. So we should be using all of our avenues to help families understand that it weighs in to a student's success in school, but also our district's performance. So I don't know. I think it'd be something worth talking about with our communications department.
We have an automated letter that goes out to parents when their student has missed, I don't know, so many days, correct? I think that might be a great opportunity to kind of push some of this information out in that automated
Okay.
letter that they're receiving anyways.
It is. One of the things that we find though is that addresses aren't current. Email addresses are not current. Many parents we talk to, they'll say they don't even check their email. And so sometimes that's just where it makes it really difficult unless we reach out to them individually at a certain point.
Okay. On to you, Dr. Dugan.
Okay, let me get back where we were. Okay, metric 1.3, students will experience rigorous aligned curriculum, have access to resources that will enrich their learning opportunities. And so this is about our curriculum and the professional development that comes from changing it. And so over the course of the strategic plan, we've had a lot of teachers that have been very involved in this. So before COVID, we had science, English, world languages, math was even before we actually created the strategic plan. And then we took a pause during COVID-19 because we couldn't have big groups of people together. So after COVID-19, we had PE and health, CTE and art, and we're still in the middle of those. And so one thing that's been happening every time that we do have these task forces, we have a good partnership with the University of Arkansas. So they'll we'll work as partnerships with their departments, and they'll usually have a professor willing to come over and guide the content-rich discussions that are going on. And then from there, once the teachers build the curriculum plans, then the Office of Teaching and Learning figure out how to actually get the professional development to teachers. And so this is a process that it's never really ending. And so it's constantly being redone. And as the state changes standards, we have to then change this again. So this is one of those things that we're constantly doing and always moving forward in. All right, metric 1.4. So this whole metric is about the inequities and inconsistencies in providing equal opportunities for all students. And so when we talk about underrepresented populations, for the most part, most of these metrics are talking about students from minority races. Some of them, though, are talking about economically disadvantaged. So, for example, the first one, the percentage of minority students in AP courses have remained fairly constant. We had about 25% in 2019, and then we currently have 24%. We see the same thing in GT with a little bit of an increase from 21% in 2019 to 23% currently. Minority students taking concurrent credit courses increased from 14% in 2019, 18.4 last fall. Economically disadvantaged made up 30% of the CTE students in 2019 and now make up 38%. And then avid enrollment, which is for all students, increased quite a bit from 155 students in 2019 to 275 for the current school year. All right, so that's the end of goal 1. Is there anything that anyone has any questions about or that we need to go over again?
Oh, Kelly, I just back to that 1.3 where you were talking about the fact that we're just ongoing with the curriculum review. Is that a metric you'd recommend we eliminate in our next plan?
I would. I think that I'm not really sure if the metrics we chose to match what exactly the board wanted to measure. And I think since this is one of those things that it's sort of just a reporting mechanism, it's not really a measurement. I do agree that this was probably something that could probably be reported in a different way than on the strategic plan.
Yeah, I think this one was supposed to be focused on rigor. And I don't think the metrics have necessarily been able to report that well. So maybe going forward, we need to think through some better metrics under that one.
I agree with that.
And one thing too, and I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time to bring this up, but I know in conversation, so for example, English language arts, there's new standards that are being released for them, but yet they're not on the right cycle as far as what was originally planned. And so I think sometimes it may be that the task force, we might need to relook at that and see if that's also going to be dependent upon when the state releases information, just because I think it'd be so prudent, for ELA to be able to come together that following year when things have been released in the spring so that they can review and make sure things are updated with what they're teaching in the classroom.
Yeah, and we've had some conversation about the fact that ours has been out of alignment. So that's a good point, Joy. Thank you.
While we're in academics, I just feel like there's so much to say here. I don't want to miss the chance. One of the charts that you showed at the beginning, and I really do, as I said, I know it's last meeting or the meeting before that, I know it's much harder to teach older dogs new tricks than it is to teach the younger ones new tricks, and to create growth. It is, I know that this is a little bit just the way that stats look, but I think it's also real, that the longer that kids are, the way that those charts look right now, the longer that kids are with us, particularly our marginalized populations, the lower their percentages get, right? So like if in third grade, kids are at like 30% on proficient, by like 10th grade, they're at 15% proficient. And I would love to see benchmarks. I would love to see the board set strategic plan benchmarks that seek to do something about that. I think to the point with the curriculum review, the curriculum cycle, I think really looking at behaviors that we want, that we know are good for learning, whatever our new standards are, I think is really important. So I would love to see some stuff in here that I know the schools are already working on, around like PLC stuff, not just that meetings are taking place, but that like PLC effectiveness, some of the stuff that's in the data rooms that we've seen again in our school tours. I think looking at educator behaviors that we know are conducive to learning, and student behaviors like being in school that we know are conducive to learning. I would love to see more of those metrics.
Okay, I'm just making notes.
So I guess like fewer like this meeting took place, and more. And I know that meetings are easy to track. Like occurrence of meetings is easy to track, and the more granular like effectiveness of those meetings is harder to measure. But the more that we can find data points that dig into what our most successful grade levels are doing, what our student support specialists want to see in educators and want to see in classrooms and want to see, really aligning what we're measuring to what professionals are pouring their energy into. that we know is effective, I think would be great. And I feel like all of I'm blanking on the name, the acronym that we use for the group that you lead, Kelly, that
Yeah,
with,
CTIS.
yeah, the stuff that you all are tracking, the more that we as a board can track and hear about that, I think.
Yeah, this definitely would lend itself to fit really well with that program anyway. And I've got some ideas about how we could probably do that. I just need to do a little bit of research on it.
Great.
And I just want to make sure to make this comment that we are going to have to revisit these goals and metrics at some point after we have a new superintendent in place. So I think it's important to make note of these things and to keep a running tally. But at this point, we're not looking to make any changes, but we'll be making some pretty major changes, hopefully starting sometime next fall.
Okay. Okay. Moving on to goal 2, all students with support will set and monitor academic and career goals in order to achieve their full potential. So under the first one, schools will use early warning indicators to identify and support learners not yet meeting expectations. So students increasing achievement in reading and math from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. In 2022, which was last year, 49.5% increase in math and 47.3% increase in reading, which is a higher increase than we saw in 2021. So you can see that we are making progress. We're actually moving students further. We moved them further in 2022 than we did in 2021. Another thing that this metric does not actually talk about, because it didn't exist when this was created, but we also, each school has target lists. And so on that target list, it's a very fluid type of monitoring system for students. Students get on the list for absolutely anything that a teacher might be worried about. So attendance could get a student on the list, and all it means is that we're just making sure that we're keeping an eye on those students, that we're going to make sure that they get extra support, that with Capturing Kids' Hearts, they may get, some extra little things that maybe other students are not getting, but we have the target list to make sure that we do get these to use early warning indicators. So that's just something I know we're not going to talk about what we're going to change right now, but that's something that we could utilize in going forward. And the percentage of students on track for graduation, which is technically 5.5 credits per year by the state, which this comes from the ESSA index. 2019, we had 94.3%. We dropped in 2021 to 86.5%, and then we're starting to come back up to 90. So again, this is a COVID effect, that we had more students who kind of fell behind whenever they were learning at home. Some students weren't as successful as they would have been if they'd been in school, but we are starting to come back up on that metric. 2.2 is about managing an enrollment and scheduling process that effectively facilitates progress toward individualized career goals and academic planning. So in 2020, 95.4% completed their student success plan activities. In 2022, the average of 8th through 11th was 95.75. So that has gone up. It's also a lot more students than we had in 2020 because we've had that going on now for about 4 years. The percentage of parents engaged in their child's student success plan was 81% in 2020 and 40% in 2022. Now, this is a little bit of a metric that's kind of hard to manage because we haven't defined what it means to be engaged. So this number actually came from CAP conference attendance, where 100% of parents were actually sent their child's student success plan. So all parents get a copy of it, but that's not the way we measured it at the very beginning. So that's kind of not where it was. Requests for student schedule requests due to errors dropped from 1,781 in 2019 to we had 40 in 2022. And these were the gaps in their schedules. Any questions so far?
40 is a lot fewer.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
really good.
Yeah.
Like that's, I feel like we should take a minute to be like, that's a whole lot better than 1,700.
And yeah, the high school's done a whole lot of work on making sure that that master schedule is as good as it can be before we start putting it into the computer. So the high school definitely deserves all the credit for all the work they've done in that.
Yeah, and I would also like to compliment our president, Mika Weitzman. I know that you are very passionate about schedules and schedule gaps during the formation of the strategic plan, and things that we track change. And good work. I love that.
Well, thank you, Megan. I appreciate that. I think in our last conversation where we did some changing of metrics, we actually decided to eliminate that 2.2.3, didn't we, Dr. Dugan? I mean, I love knowing that, and it's always good to report that stuff, but I don't even think we've made so many improvements in that area. I don't think it's something we're still aiming to measure.
Yeah, I think that is what we decided.
Yeah.
So
at least
yeah.
I'm looking at this updated, kind of digital copy, and I think we took that metric out. So, but it's still good to know.
Okay.
And another thing too, just to let you know, for junior highs, the district tech department we call it the CAT app. It's not really an app. It's, something that parents log on to, but it kind of creates a worksheet and a working document. So then they can go in at any time, work on things, which also helps with that CAP conference piece. And that's eliminated a lot of errors as well. So kudos to them, because that's been a lot of effort for them to put that in place. And they've been doing that for 2 years.
With the student success plan, parent engagement stuff there, I know that parental involvement in students' education is very, very important to people. And I think that while I know that it's hard to measure engagement, I think that we want, my preference would be to continue to work towards ways to find and track our success in creating these moments where parents do engage in what their kids are up to in school, like that we show that is a collaborative effort. We put a lot of effort into making sure that it is collaborative, and I just feel like I think it would be smart to be tracking this and to have clear data to share on the working as a home school student team to educate kids.
Yeah, and this metric has always been hard to measure because the student success plan is made up of several different activities in Naviance. And so I think that that's just something that's been hard. So I look forward to working with Dr. Hudson to figure out a different way of measuring it that would capture what the board would like to see.
Thank you. I know it's not easy, but I really appreciate your efforts on that, Dr. Hudson's.
Interested to better understand maybe the tracking capabilities available in Naviance, if that's where the student success plan is kept. How might we think about leveraging that tool? I know there are a lot of career choice informational tools for parents. There are a lot of things in Naviance that parents might really find value in, and I'm wondering if there are ways to track parent logins or parent engagement in that tool that would also serve as a proxy for how we're leveraging that tool.
I think we may have lost Joy Shirley, but no, I think that's a good point, Keaton. Oh, are you there? We're still using Naviance, right?
Yep. Yes, we are. Yes.
Okay, and planning to going forward, right?
Yes,
didn't-
the student success plans are housed in there.
Okay, so I think that's a good point.
Okay, we ready to go forward?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so 2.3 is about career-focused pathways and increased access to relevant career experiences through internships, industry certification, soft skills, community service opportunities. So COVID impacted the number of CTE completers. We had a high of 273 in 2020. Last year's completer number was 163. So we did fall in that category. However, certifications have increased 124% from a baseline in the year 2018 when students earned 635 certifications to last year earning 1,428 certifications. So we may not have had the same number of completers, but we very much increased our CTE complete certifications. We had internships. We only had 18 in 2018. We went to 44 in the fall of 2022. And then finally, we did not actually do a lot of work with soft skills. However, due to some of the COVID impact, executive functioning, skill development is an area educators are working to address. So students who may not have had the same time of preschool experiences that students in the past have. COVID stopped some of them from being able to go to preschool. So some of our teachers have had to learn a lot more about how to teach those executive functions. And so as we move forward, I think instead of seeing the word soft skills, you're going to see more talk about executive functioning. All right, so that's all of goal 2. Do we need to stop and talk about anything else?
I'd just like to jump in real quick. I spent 2 incredible days with the CTE Task Force last week, and I just wanted to share how inspiring it was to be with those department leaders and educators as they were dreaming about the future of their programs, and also just share that maybe this is an optimistic view, but it seems like both with the state focus on workforce, there's potential for new funding for CTE programs. We also apparently expect CTE to be incorporated in the ESSA grades update, and there were yes, Joy Shirley says durable skills. That was the term that the CTE folks were using for soft skills. And also wanted to let the board know that it appears there could be some local funding opportunities coming forward around CTE, and I think my sense is that the more responsive we can show we are to industry and workforce demands, the better position we might be for those sort of funding opportunities, both at the state and at the local private level.
All right, anything else before we go to goal 3?
I would just, this is quick, but I think that on the executive functioning skill side, I feel like as a board, that might be a fun thing for us to figure out ways to incorporate into our meetings with community participation, just having people who come to speak to us. or we ourselves, just, I think figuring out ways to kind of align sharing adult tips on that with students and sharing out so some of that stuff in, we can't model like a lot of parts of school, but I think we can model that soft skills, civility, executive functioning in our meetings, and so that everything is kind of aligned all the way through. And I love to work with people on that, how the board can play a real role in that.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Oops. Okay, goal 3. All students learn in a culture of integrity, honesty, and trust. So the first metric, the district will create an atmosphere of equal opportunity and mutual respect through transparent communication and professional and staff interaction. So metrics, the first couple of metrics was about trying to get more parents to be involved and trying to figure out how we can improve communication. And so actually, this is one of the things that was probably impacted completely by COVID, but for good and bad things. So through the COVID pandemic, while we reduced in-person gatherings, I would say all of our teachers, all of our staff, all learned how to do things through technology. And doing that, I think we created different ways of being able to communicate with parents and with the community. I think we got faster in how we were getting information from the district to the community. So a lot of the things that we had set up already sort of sped up during the COVID pandemic. And so while we couldn't actually increase parent involvement as far as bringing them to school, I think we learned a lot of different ways, including building task force from community members through Zoom meetings, having different committees work on different things as far as what the district needed at a certain time during the year where we were impacted the most. And even though we didn't get to do the district communication audit, it is scheduled to be revisited next spring. So this is sort of those things that we sort of went really fast in some areas and then we slowed down in others. So these metrics, you'll see too, we'll look a little bit at the results from the surveys. So when it comes to recruitment and hiring, we had a goal of increasing diversity of the teaching staff to 8.1% by 2023. And so we were at 5.4% in 2019, and then we actually exceeded our goal in 2021 of 8.1. So this would be one of those goals that we could check off and say we did. Also, when it comes to hiring better quality staff, all the administrators have been trained in behavior event interviewing to increase the likelihood of hiring someone who's going to have the greatest positive impact. So all the administrators went through that training, and it's designed to elicit responses from the interviewee so that we can figure out who would be the best fit for our district. All right, and then 3.3 is about creating pathways for feedback and dialogue to allow students, staff, parents, and community members to be heard and valued. We send a lot of surveys to parents, staff, and students. And during the 2021 school year, at the height of the pandemic, FPS created and sent out surveys that help guide the superintendent and executive cabinet in making decisions. So we actually sent out, for a while, we were sending out about one survey per month. We were analyzing the information and then giving it to executive cabinet so they could make decisions that could help students in the moment. We also had several committees that were created to evaluate information. So we had committees that their sole purpose was to go out and gather information from their colleagues, bring it to the committee, and then that committee would then compile all the information, and then that information would be given to executive cabinet as well. So if you look as a whole, what happened, communication to and from stakeholders became more timely and transparent. And overwhelmingly, because I was part of analyzing all the data from those committees, the committee members really appreciated having that ability and the value of being able to talk and express what their colleagues were feeling and their parents. So we have always sent out a parent survey, except we didn't send it out in 2020, 2021, meaning we sent out surveys. We did not send this particular survey out because this is part of a bigger survey. And we felt like we already had a lot of information, and some of these questions didn't really lend itself to that time period. So you can see that in general, we've stayed roughly the same, but there are a few things that we went down in. For instance, activities and events at my child's school were well communicated to me in 2022. So this survey is actually given in the spring. And so at the time the survey was being sent out, we were just beginning to invite parents back in. And so we know a lot of parents wanted to get back into the school sooner. So that could have been one reason why we had such a drop in that metric. We'll see when we put out the survey again this semester if we start seeing that come back up. I visit my child's school website often, also dropped. It may be because we have increased other ways of communicating to parents, such as social media, and some of our parents would rather do that instead of go to the website. But again, these questions will stay on the survey and we'll just keep going every year so we can monitor. So the staff survey, we have the differences between 2019 before the COVID pandemic, 2022, and you can see in all categories we have increased. So all the work that's been done in building more positive cultures, all the work that was done during the pandemic to try to help and support teachers, I think you're seeing a result of they do feel better in these particular areas.
Dr. Dugan?
Yes.
I just want to make sure this is not a 100-point scale, right?
No, and actually, if you look at the top, every scale, because they come from different surveys, every survey has a different scale. So the first one's 1 to 5, this one's 1 to 7. And then the student survey is 0 to 3.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, highlighting that scale part is helpful just so we don't try to equate one with the other. But
yeah,
it is good to see. Yeah. Good to see growth.
I have it up there. I should have said that. Yeah, they're completely different scales because we use questions. This student survey is actually the PBIS survey. So we actually use this anyway for a lot of our school culture things. So we just use the survey that they had already created. With the student survey, it's been pretty stable. So before COVID and after COVID, the way the students are viewing it is about the same, which is pretty interesting. All right. Any questions about the survey data?
I just think it's worth noting, and you did touch on this, that people are not going to websites very often.
Mm-hmm.
I just think it's an important thing to take into account as we seek to communicate with our parents. We have to kind of give them that information as opposed to asking them to seek it out, I think is what it tells me.
And I think that the communication department has some metrics actually on like how often people are visiting compared to how often people are looking at posts on maybe Facebook. So I think it's a fair point that you're probably right about that. Right, the next metric, and this really goes into, this is a hard metric to measure. Every school established a culture of equity, integrity, and trust. So the things that we picked may not be what we need to stay with as we move forward to a new plan, because 100% of certified staff receive training on Title IX and other mandated professional development every year. We use individualized behavioral and instructional plans and staff input to monitor mental health needs of students. And then the number of high school students involved in school activities remains constant. So there was about 75% in 2020 and 75%. They were actually asked in fall of 2022. So that's current year's percentages. All right. And that's it for goals 1 through 3. Usually Dr. Duncan does goal 4. So I've not included that. And I think you guys are pretty well versed on all of that anyway.
Dr. Dugan, for the one that we have up on our screen right now, the culture one, I agree with you that we probably need some additional data points. Do we still ask in any capacity whether kids at all of our ages have a trusted adult at school?
We do. It may not actually say that exact same thing. It may be something like there's a teacher I feel comfortable with or something like that. We also, in the target list, whenever so the first set of data comes from me and I send it to schools. One of the columns is who is their trusted adult. And so we're encouraging, at least, even if the student may not say they do, that we've got adults who are willing to step forward and say, I will be the trusted adult. So that is definitely something that we're monitoring, probably not in a very rigorous way, because not every student is on the target list. So, but we do recognize that is important.
Yeah, I think that's a really, that trusted adult. And I think that it's very important to have staff be intentional about working to be a trusted adult for kids. But I think that the kids' perception of whether they have a trusted adult at school is really important. I think we can ask that in a lot of different ways. We can ask it with trusted adult language. We can ask about, like, I mean, this is definitely not the right way to phrase this, but like, who's your favorite teacher? Like, who do you look forward? Do you have an adult in the building that you look forward to seeing every day? Or like, who is the adult in the building that you look forward to seeing every day? And then we don't really care about, I mean, of course we care about the name, but we can like check the box that they had one. And then maybe with staff too, like I have another person that I work with who I look forward to seeing when I go to work every day. Like, I think that those, like, do you have a person, is really, those might be good numbers, and we might already be collecting them in some capacity and might be able to pop them into the plan.
Well, and what we could do moving forward with the new plan is, as we start with baselines, we could change and add questions that would, maybe we could pull the answers that staff or even parents and definitely students have, pull it into some of these other matrices. So maybe with this metric, we may ask a question that pertains to it on the student survey, but we actually pull it out into this metric that maybe we say this is question 7 on the parent, on the student survey, or this is question 4 for the teacher survey. I mean, so I could see where we could actually use 1 or 2 surveys by changing what we have, and we could probably get some better answers than some of the way we've been doing metrics. So just move it more from a quantitative into a qualitative type survey.
Yeah, and I think that those self-reporting pieces could be really powerful. I think I love that idea of pulling questions, and just listening to what you just said just then, I feel like it would be good to ask families too. Like, is there somebody in your child's school that you feel like you can go to get information? Like, do you, if you have a question or an issue at school, do you know who to go to? Like, do you have someone to guide you in finding your way to the answer that you need? Because it doesn't matter, like if your kid is in 3rd grade, but you really made a bond with your kid's 1st grade teacher, and that's like your go-to in the school. Like we want to make sure that all families have a person too, or as many families as we can, that we're growing our number of families with a person. So
Actually, I think we could definitely measure that. That would make it a little easier to.
I think one of the things that gets confusing on the way our plan is laid out is when we were originally with goal 3, we were talking about internal culture in our district from the viewpoint both of students and staff, but most of our metrics are trying to get at the culture in our school buildings versus the experience and the ways we're setting up kids for success, I guess. And I think goal 2 is more focused on that. Like, what are we doing to help kids achieve their full potential? And goal 3 is focused on the culture. And so many, like, this is a perfect example, this question of whether or not a child has a trusted adult that impacts both of those things. And so I think because of the fact that we divided it out this way, it's very difficult to figure out where to plug these metrics in. And maybe there's a way going forward where we can have a clearer delineation. And I'm not saying that we can't use that same measurement in 2 different ways, because that is a really important question. It just has such a broad impact. But I just feel like we could do a better job of clarifying what we're trying to measure in each of these goals.
I agree with that.
Yeah, or we can use that student survey and pull the answers to some of the questions to answer stuff in goal 2, and some of the answers to answer stuff in goal 3. That, like, it can look like one survey to the person taking the survey, and we can pull it apart by marking particular questions.
Yeah, that's definitely easy to do. And we do have extra questions. It's just that when we did the baseline, we decided to just keep it to what we had agreed to first. I think too, we've already got some of the surveys built. We just need to look at what we have and maybe change some of the questions and add a few, especially for the parents. So this is definitely doable. Well,
I appreciate your time in updating us, Dr. Dugan, and I think this is good food for thought that we've all, I'm sure, taken some notes to take into our next chapter. I mean, there's just so much change ahead for us, but I do feel like some of this, a lot of this will just like it helped us navigate the changes that came with COVID. I think that a lot of these priorities will be instrumental in helping us transition to new leadership, and then hopefully, you know, our next superintendent will enhance this and make some tweaks and changes. But I still think it's so important. One of the things we've bragged about over and over is it's both a community-led and a board-led document that reflects the priorities of our community. And so it's not something that is being put on people. It's something that we've all had a chance to speak into. And so I just hope that we can keep that priority going forward. But and I think I speak for the board in that regard. I think that's something that we're really proud of and hope to continue doing. But if board members, do you have any other questions for Dr. Dugan? We're about 15 minutes away from the start of our regular meeting. So we have a few minutes if you have more questions or comments.
Do we still have one more section to go through?
No, we're done.
We're not
Oh.
going to go through goal 4 just because we've been spending so much time talking about facilities over the last couple of years.
Okay, I'm sorry, I missed that part. Thanks.
Anybody else? Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Dugan. We appreciate all of your time and research, and we will call this workshop adjourned, and we'll see you all in about 15 minutes. Thank you.